Hello and welcome back to Shock's Talks. Today we're going to talk about psychic abilities, functions of consciousness, ancient yogic teachings that helped to lay out the science of these functions of consciousness, and modern witchy perspectives on the matter, along with remote viewing and how it all ties into the UFO UAP phenomena. So thanks for being here today. And just so you know, I always put links in the description box below. I have a TikTok account now where I'm posting little short videos. I don't know, I'm trying to get people to come over to YouTube. But on this channel, there are playlists, there are podcast playlists. It's all the same stuff, but it's just organized by the topic of the season. So last year I did a UFO deep dive, I did a psychic season, I did a couple episodes on abduction. And now we're back just kind of moving forward with all of that foundational knowledge into the deeper layers of this topic. So if you're into this kind of stuff, I would really appreciate any kind of liking, sharing, subscribing to the channel, all that stuff, because I do want to grow my channel. So let's start off with a little bit about the Yoga Sutras. So I've talked about the Yoga Sutras before, and the reason I'm bringing this up today is because as we continue to explore psychic phenomena, psionics, like we've been hearing about with this new whistleblower, Jake Barber, the egg-shaped UFO guy, UAP, we need to remember that all humans, since way back when, have had the ability to tap into the larger consciousness system, which is life itself, the whole system of reality. They have been able to access information directly through meditation and other practices, and sometimes just through their own inner knowing. And all kinds of different people have been trying to describe what they've learned to everyone else for years and years and years. These are people that we call mystics or religious figures. And then sometimes in modern times, we have more of that going on with like scientists and psychologists and people who are curious and open and committed to the truth. So all this is to say that everything we're learning about now is nothing new, and we all exist on a spectrum of psychic abilities, just like so many other things in life. There's not just, these things aren't limited to like the 5 clair senses or anyone's system of description describing these things. These things are completely limitless in my mind. And so all of us, if we're interested in tapping into our own abilities, we need to get really clear about why we want to do that. And then we need to open to the possibilities around how we might perceive information, because oftentimes it's very unique to the person and we all have a different flavor of psychic ability. So the Yoga Sutras, I'm just going to read you this little section. There's a lot of different translations and interpretations of the Yoga Sutras. I am holding in my hands the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translation and commentary by Sri Swami Satchidananda. So this is what the book looks like. And I'm going to read you something from the very beginning here. It is not known exactly when Sri Patanjali lived, or even if he was a single person rather than several persons using the same title. Estimates of the date of the sutras range from 5000 BC to 300 AD. In any case, he did not in any sense invent Raja Yoga, but rather systemized it and compiled the already existing ideas and practices. Since that time, he has been considered the father of yoga, and his sutras are the basis for all of the various types of meditation and yoga which flourish today in their myriad forms. So that's just a little background about where these sutras come from and how long they've been out there. And the word sutra means thread. So these are like really short little phrases that people jotted down either when they were listening to this one person or this group of teachers. We don't really know. And so they're really very simple, direct, complete little statements that help us to understand how to navigate this reality, basically. And a lot of this stuff has to do with the world of thoughts and the mind and the functions of the mind, or like I like to think of it as the functions of consciousness. So I'm just kind of rooting us in this before we jump off into some other stuff, because I think it's a good reminder that there's a lot of knowledge available to us, and we do not have to get lost in the sauce right now with all the modern stuff that's going on and start to feel like, this is all secret programs and really high level and only really special people can do these things. Or, we're listening to the telepathy tapes right now and it's really cool. But then some people are starting to say, wow, these nonverbal autistic people, like everyone has to like follow them and listen to them because they're the really special ones. And of course they're very special, and we're all very special because all of us are capable of these things. And like I said, I think in order to start down a path of learning and growing our own abilities, we have to start with a purpose. We have to have clarity around why we're doing this. So for example, if we just want to access data for malicious reasons, we're not going to get very far. We're not going to make a lot of progress because the whole larger consciousness system is not going to support that goal. If we are just kind of willy-nilly, like, I just want as much information as I can about everything out there, that's going to cause a lot of suffering because we're going to be overwhelmed with chaos and flooded with all kinds of information that we don't actually need and doesn't pertain to us, and we can't really apply it in our experiences. And then we're going to be drowning in psychic information. And that happens if you're a very sensitive person, because we live in a psychic atmosphere, and there's something that I like to call psychic weather, and that is the interference patterns of all of our different thoughts. So I'm going to read a little bit from the Thought Power book also to describe more what I'm talking about here. But I just want to read you one of these little sutras to also remind us that this idea of astral travel, out-of-body experience, or as Tom Campbell says, accessing data from the data stream, this idea is also not new. And in Patanjali's sutras, one of those sutras says, "Those who merely leave their physical bodies and attain the state of celestial deities, or those who get merged in nature, have rebirth." So I'm going to read the description that comes after it so we can expand on that a little bit. Suppose you practice a little samprajnata samadhi and then die. Do you lose all the benefit? Patanjali says no. Once you gain a certain mastery over your nature, but lose this body before attaining the highest goal of liberation, you go on to become one of the controllers of nature. Such people are called videhas. Suppose you have mastered the gross elements without going into the subtler ones. You become the controller of the gross elements of nature. If you have stopped at the practice of sa'asmita samadhi, having reached the very depth of your nature, you would have become the master of nature. Such people are called the Siddha Purushas, or the gods who control the different phenomena. Indra, Varyuna, Agni, and so on, according to the Hindu names. But whoever they become, they have to come back to study further and get liberated. Temporarily, they have dropped out of nature, but get the final degree they have to enter the university again. We drop out temporarily, but if we are interested in getting the degree, we have to go back to the university. Prakriti is that university. You go to a certain point and get into a higher abode and control nature. But still, the seeds of desires and attachments are there. You are not completely liberated. So you come back again to fulfill the other practices and get the degree. That's why even the gods have to become human beings. It is only on the human level that there is a possibility of getting liberation. The gods are just human beings who have evolved a little further and learned to control nature, and by that control have earned the enjoyment of certain pleasures in the heavens. But after that they come back. This coming and going will always be there until they burn all the seeds of desire and become completely liberated by knowing themselves. So there's a lot in here, but As we know, there's so many different kinds of mythologies where we hear about different kinds of gods, and they have more power or more abilities than us mere mortals. But what you're hearing here is that many souls are cycling back and forth between these different planes of existence. And there's something really special and really important about this concentrated human experience that you can't get anywhere else. So it's hard to remember, because this life is full of huge, deep suffering, like so much suffering and so much pain. I don't think any of us are exempt from that. And sometimes when that's happening, we just want to leave. We want to get out of here. We don't want to feel that anymore. But we came here to feel that, to go through that, in order to reach more liberation, more freedom, more true knowing, and deeper connection to truth and to all that is. So I like to use these little nuggets just to kind of help motivate myself to continue being in this world, living my life. It helps me to feel that there is a deep spiritual purpose to my existence, whether or not I'm achieving externally, whether or not anyone approves of me, whether or not I'm succeeding in the material ways. I still have this really important job of just being here and learning my lessons and evolving my soul. And that gives me great comfort and strength. And it helps me to prioritize what I need to do with whatever power I do have. So we're going to go into that next. So let's talk about the psychic weather, and let's see if I can find this little bit that I wanted to read about the psychic weather. So I have 3 episodes on this book, Thought Power, so you can go back and find those. This is a Shivananda book. Super great book. I love it. And got the sniffles today. Let's have a little moment of silence while I look for this passage. Oh, here we go. Okay, so the medium through which thoughts travel. And again, I think of these things as metaphors. These are all people trying to describe, usually poetically, this deep, deep truth that they have come to know that is probably impossible to really put into words. But we have so many different versions of people trying to put these things into words, and that is a beautiful gift. And so it's worth analyzing and contemplating. We don't have to take it all literally. We don't have to subscribe to any one system or set of beliefs when it comes to this, but we can use it as inspiration for developing our own unique perspectives on this phenomena. So the medium through which thoughts travel. If we throw a piece of stone into a tank or a pool of water, it will produce a succession of concentric waves traveling all around from the affected place. The light of a candle will similarly give rise to waves of ethereal vibrations traveling in all directions from the candle. In the same manner, when a thought, whether good or evil, crosses the mind of a person, it gives rise to vibrations in the manas, or mental atmosphere, which travel far and wide in all directions. What is the possible medium through which thoughts can travel from one mind to another? The best possible explanation is that manas, or mind substance, fills all space like ether, and it serves as the vehicle for thoughts, as prana is the vehicle for feeling, as ether is the vehicle for heat, light, and electricity, and as air is the vehicle for sound. So the things that I wanted to point out from this section are mainly around this idea of ripples. So when he's talking about this manas, or the substance, the vehicle for thought, I think that's a metaphor. It's a metaphor because consciousness is non-physical. So we need, because we're primarily focused in a physical existence, we humans like to use physical metaphors to help us grasp these concepts that go beyond our very reality frame. You know, they go outside of our reality frame. So the manas is really just a metaphor, but the idea of it is that there is some, it's an informational substance. So it's not a physical substance, but it's a concept that is being created to describe something that we can use to navigate like how we approach these functions of consciousness. And the reason this metaphor is useful is because it can help us to visualize and imagine the interference patterns that can occur when all of us are just firing off our thoughts in a chaotic manner. So if I'm one rock dropping into the pond, making my ripples going out, and however many billions of people are also dropping their thought rocks into the same pond, we're getting these crisscrossing patterns of the effect of our thoughts as it spreads out and away from us and meets other people's thought waves. And then, you know, those interference patterns are going to cause new patterns to emerge. And that's what I think of as the psychic weather. So the reason this has been on my mind is because we're in a really intense time in reality, and things aren't really getting easier necessarily. We are all having to adapt and evolve to contend with all kinds of new disasters, natural and human. We are dealing with this momentum of the climate crisis, and we're seeing the effects of it. And the only way to start seeing different effects later down the line is if we start making much better choices now. But it's really hard to stop and make really healthy, good choices in life when we are living in capitalism, because we are forced to be productive and we're struggling. And so there's a lot of fear and suffering and resentment. And then there's also this feeling of like we can never get our heads above water. So we're kind of, unfortunately, right now, as I see it, we're in a moment where we haven't made that big change yet of like moving in another direction. So we're continuing to see the negative effects of like us just struggling collectively, basically, and not having the time or energy to make good choices to start building a better reality for all of us. Now, that's not to say that there aren't really good things happening, because of course there's so many good things happening. And as more and more people wake up to their own inner truth, we will just naturally see a better reality emerge, because each one of us is living more consciously. So it's not like it's all horrible, but if you feel like you might be one of those people who is struggling to get your head above water, I do think that teachings like yoga are really useful, because they allow us to, like I said, prioritize how to use these powers. So what I mean by prioritizing is basically starting at ground zero, which is the self. You know, before we can go outward and make big changes in reality, we do have to like clean up our own inner landscape, and we have to start taking care of ourselves. And so a lot of what we do and how we operate in reality, a lot of our choices are coming from unconscious impulses. So for example, I've been having a lot of pain in my body, in my back. I have this kind of injury that I'm working through, and it's like this whole psoas thing. But when I really tune into my whole body, I can feel it all the way from my left foot up to the back of my skull on the left side of my body. There's tension in so many different places running up and down my body. So on a day where I am already struggling mentally and overwhelmed, and my body tension is flaring up, I'm going to be more likely to maybe snap at somebody or make a bad decision or reach for something to make me feel better in the short term that isn't really going to benefit me in the long term. So my ground up approach, if I want to overcome that, is I really have to pause everything else and just deal with the body thing. And that's not easy because it takes a long time to heal the body, and there's lots of steps that go into that. Like I do different things physically, like working out, dancing, self-massage with like rolling on a foam roller or rolling on a ball, but it's like it's taking a long time. There's a lot of steps to this, and as soon as you release one muscle, the pain kind of like travels to a new place, and then that pain gets really loud somewhere else. So I really have to just kind of put everything else aside and just focus on what does my body need today. And I might not be able to solve the whole problem in one day, but if every day I wake up and I tune into my own body and say, you know what, you're my number one priority right now, and you're my level one, like I will do more things next, but first of all, what do you need? A glass of water? Do you need to go for a walk? Do you need to stretch a little bit? Do some hip openers? Like, let's tune in and see what needs to happen. That's a nice way to like progress through the day, because once I've attended to my body, then I can start thinking about other things. So yoga is a science that gives you this really clear perspective of all the different layers of self that you need to be attending to. So you have like your different koshas or your different bodies, and the physical is one, but there's like energetic bodies and mental bodies and all these other layers of self. So for me personally, I might decide next I'm going to go to my mental layer. What needs to happen in the mental layer? And so meditation is the tool for tuning into that. Like, what is going on in my mind right now? What kinds of thoughts are firing off out into reality that are contributing to the collective psychic weather? Am I thinking happy thoughts? Am I thinking peaceful thoughts? Are they intelligent thoughts? Are they just repetitive memes that I've picked up from all the media that I consume that are just playing in my mind? Is there a song playing in my mind? Am I stressing? Am I planning for a negative future by worrying about every bad thing that could happen? Or am I slowing all those thoughts from firing off by just being in the present moment, which is way harder than anyone makes it out to be? And that includes like sensing into the body and slowing down the mental chatter and just observing what's around. So when we hear about things like psionics, you can be sure that people that are working in programs like that have a great ability to control the mind. And not only have they learned to control their own minds, but they've learned to use their consciousness to engage with other things, potentially these UFOs or beings on other planets. Where did I put my other book? There's one, oh yeah. So psionics is a new term to me, but this book, Above Black by Dan Sherman, this came out in 2001. And this person talks about something that sounds very similar or like a possible precursor to psionic programs. And this was a secret program where people were being trained to have psychic communications with aliens on other planes or other dimensions. But what this man found out as an intuitive communicator for this black program for the U.S. Air Force was that he had been tampered with in the womb. His mother, they did something along the lines of like inserting some alien DNA. So he was given genetic modifications that were meant to help him in these specific abilities. And then he was later recruited to the program by people who knew all along that he had this added layer in his genetics that he didn't even know about until he was deep in the program. So this is an interesting story, but it gets me thinking about, again, the spectrum of psychic abilities and this possibility of these other beings, and they all have telepathic abilities according to all of the literature and the abduction accounts and the government insiders and all the people that have had anything to say about aliens. Usually they report some kind of telepathy. So I'm currently still reading Abduction by Mack. And in this book, even just early into the first case that I'm going through, which is someone he calls Ed, you hear a lot about these experiences that are telepathic, and also you hear about these experiences that sound so much like the typical astral travel or out-of-body experiences. So let me read you this, and then I'm going to tie it back into the sutras too. So at the end of the first session, we discussed the fact that Ed's teenage experience occurred 2 months before the Betty and Barney Hill case that began the history of modern abductions, and he expressed with some conflict a desire to gain access to further memories, especially of the information that the female alien provided him in the capsule through hypnosis. So he wants to do hypnosis to like recover more of his memories. Let's see, this was not the paragraph I was looking for. This is it. Okay, so next, Ed felt himself to be very stiff and out someplace along the shoreline, floating someplace. This is when he's talking about his actual experiences, and it's Mack reporting back about what this client was uncovering. He recalled hearing the surf pounding and became more perplexed about the fact that he was moving above the water, somewhere along the coast with no visible means of propulsion. Although he did have a funny feeling that they're around me someplace, he felt that the beings were very gentle without mental intimidation or harshness to their physical treatment of me, but definitely we are in control, thank you. So that's like the vibe of the aliens. I think I read you this last time maybe, but I just think that's so interesting. Like he's out floating, in the air above the shoreline somewhere. He even thinks to himself at some point, like, how weird would this be if somebody saw me? And sometimes people do see other people being abducted, but sometimes nobody sees them. And either way, it could still be a kind of astral travel where one of those bodies or koshas, some other subtler body that is not your physical body is the body that's being taken out. And then back to the idea of the sutras and these gods or advanced beings, what if these aliens are actually just non-physical entities who are just like us? Sometimes they're in human form, sometimes they're in another form, depending on whatever life we're all in. But when they're in their non-physical forms, they're still very interested in us because we're in a very specific reality frame, doing specific things and learning specific things. And they have access to this reality frame because the non-physical, according to many, all the non-physical entities have access to this and awareness of us. We are the ones that have chosen or maybe have been placed in a reality where we don't have access to them, or so it seems at the beginning of life. And even that's not true because a lot of kids have easy access to all of it, but then you get trained out of it as time goes on. And then a lot of us get back to it later in life because we realize, oh, that's more normal actually. It's more natural to be connected to all the realms and not just the physical realm. But for some reason, there's like a portion of this life where we are so focused on our physical life and everything in this physical matter reality that we forget about all the other realities and all the other life forms that exist just outside of our physical perceptions. So it sounds like these, what people call aliens, in some of these experiences, they do have, in a way, powers. They're really, they're powerful in the sense that they can pull people maybe out of their body or maybe physically or by some other technological means out to their ships or to some other location. A lot of them really do seem like they're doing it on a sort of astral plane. And he goes on to talk about how he says this quote, she was reading my mind like an open book. So this alien being, this woman that he connects to, this alien woman, like automatically just by looking at her, he has the sense and he understands that she has access to the inside of his mind. She knows everything. So that's really unnerving. And that is a huge part of the psychological trauma that people go through when they have these abduction experiences, because we live in a reality where the normal thing is to hide ourselves from each other. The normal thing is to have privacy. The normal thing is to have masks and layers that we place on top of our true nature. And that's how we all go about interfacing in this reality. It's like this so much fakeness, but whatever, that's the way it is here. And more people who wake up to their true nature and start getting into like that authentic being and stripping away those masks and stripping away those filters, it starts to look really weird and it starts to look really strange that like people, like, why is everybody lying? Why is there so much going on behind everybody's words that they say, you know? And that's enough to drive some people crazy. But the people that have like encounters with non-physical entities or abduction experiences, they have to go through the pain and suffering of that rude awakening of all of a sudden, everything I thought I knew is not true. I don't have control over my own thoughts. I don't know how to hide them. These other beings have complete and total access. So I think that can be like a whole psychological shock that can affect people for a long time after. But for some people, it becomes a kind of awakening where they feel liberated and they start to operate in reality in a whole new way, a completely different way of being, because they now have this new understanding that some people can see through all the bullshit. Some people can see right into me. Some people know everything. And I would say all of us have that ability. So back to the spectrum of psychic abilities. I was just thinking about how even with our physical senses, we all exist on a spectrum. Even those of us who have what our society might call full and total ability, like we are able-bodied, all of our senses work, there's still things that can impair our senses. So, for example, age. At different ages, our senses function in different ways based on where our body is at. Diet, different diseases or conditions can have an impact on how our senses are working. And substances, if you drink some alcohol, you might have 20/20 vision on a regular basis, but all of a sudden your vision is blurred and you're not seeing things quite the same, or all kinds of other things like that. So this is just to say that there are many factors that can impact the function of our senses on a physical level, and I believe the same is true on a psychic level. And you'll hear a lot of people talking about you need to clear your body, or you need to do this practice or that practice, or these kriyas, or you need to go on a fast, or you need to live out in nature and get rid of all your technology. You got to go off sugar, you got to quit smoking, you got to do this, you got to do that. But we all have seen exceptions to the rule because we're all very unique and different. And so I think the most important thing is, instead of fixating on like, this worked for me and now it needs to work for everybody else, we just have to think of this all as like a menu of options of inspiration. So like different people have figured out different things that do or don't work for them when it comes to optimizing their psychic functions and their functions of consciousness. And each one of us has the job of determining our own set of rules or tips or tricks or what works for us. So for me personally, I don't have the time in my life to be living a perfectly pure and yogic lifestyle, nor am I interested in that right now. So I'm hoping that I can just keep working with what I've got, and I eat what I have to eat, and I live where I have to live, and I'm going to participate in society, and I'm also going to find my own little tips and tricks for how I can continue to tune into my own intuition, open my perception to valuable and beneficial information that aligns with my personal goals and sense of purpose. And I'm just figuring out my own little formula. And I encourage everybody to do the same because I think it's really fun and exciting. And along with that, you can also start to discover that the way you receive information is also on this infinite spectrum of possibilities. So let's talk about the clairs. So we've talked about this book before, Psychic Witch by Matt Aron. And in this book, you have, I believe, I haven't opened this in a while, but there's some descriptions of the different psychic senses. And people call these the clairs because you've heard of like clairvoyance, for example. And there are other clairs that seem to kind of correspond with our other physical senses. But this is something where I feel like there's probably so many more types of sensing abilities, even in between all of these main ones. Let's see if I can find it. Well, should have gone in here earlier and just put some bookmarks in. Well, let's just find something random then. That'll be fun. Here we go. Brainwave states. This is very similar to exactly what Shivananda says in Thought Power. So how do we begin perceiving energy beyond our 5 primary senses? Radios work by transmitting on different hertz frequencies. By tuning into the right channel with the appropriate frequency on your radio, you are able to perceive that once unperceivable frequency. Like radio waves, our brains produce subtle electrical impulses generated by masses of neurons communicating to each other for particular activities that we are engaged in, and create specific states of consciousness. Each brainwave state is named after a Greek letter and is measured by the cycles per second, called hertz. Probably heard of this. There are 5 brainwave states: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta. Each one is distinguished by their hertz cycle, though there's areas of overlap. By learning to alter our brainwave states, we learn to alter our consciousness. Cool. So he goes on to describe, or they, I'm not sure, to describe all these different states and what they mean. And you can actually find frequencies like the binaural beats that correspond to these. I've been working with a theta frequency recently for my own mental reprogramming, because I heard that that's a good brainwave state to be in if you want to implant new subconscious beliefs. And it's kind of like a little like behind the scenes, like kind of rewiring the computer. And the one that I've been working on is reprogramming myself around my fears that I have when it comes to anomalous experiences. And I'll get back to the clairs in a second, but this came up for me because of the wording around out of body. I think because I have formed this alliance with my body and I have committed to protecting and loving my body and my own mind doesn't like it when I say out of body, because that says, where are you going? You're abandoning me? I don't like that. I don't want to be left alone. You're my person. You need to be driving this vehicle. Don't leave me. And so everything in me is resisting that idea of out of body, because that metaphor or that term is triggering other subconscious beliefs and fears that exist within me. So I started working on reprogramming around that and also changing my language. That's why I like Tom Campbell's shifting of data streams, because it feels more neutral and it feels safer and easier. Even astral travel is fine for me because it makes me feel like I can still keep energy in my body, even if my conscious awareness is traveling somewhere else and having another experience. But then the other night I started thinking like, I was having a little conversation with myself, and the voice in me is like, you say you want to have these paranormal experiences. I've had a lot already, but it's like, you want more, you want to get back into certain things. Like, you say that, but wouldn't you be scared if it really happened? And I had these 2 rocks on my table, and I was trying to meditate and ground, and I wanted those rocks, but I didn't want to get up. So I was like doing the Jedi mind trick where I was sticking out my hand, just kind of joking to myself, like, what if those rocks just flew into my hand right now? And then I was like, the voice in my head was like, you would lose your shit. Like, you would be so, it would ruin your life. Like your brain isn't ready for that type of thing to happen. You would lose your mind. It would be too much. And I was like, dang, that's so true. Like there's so many anomalous things that I couldn't possibly begin to experience right now because it would really derail me. It would be too scary. It would be too out of the norm. So how do you get to that place where it is normal? And I think that the key is to wade into the water slowly. It's like you don't need to jump to these really crazy, weird things happening. Sometimes you have no control, but maybe we just need to tap in at a level that feels comfortable. So a level that feels comfortable when it comes to these clair senses is like along the lines of synchronicity. So I'm just going to go over the clairs from memory. We have clairvoyance, which is the sight, psychic sight. We have clairaudience, which is the psychic hearing. We have clairsentience, the psychic feeling. We have clairgustance and clairalience, which is taste and smell. And let's see, I think those are the main five. And then I believe there's there might be another one that's like an energy one, or claircognizance. That's the knowing. So these, again, are metaphors for ways in which consciousness can interpret data and render that data within your system for you to work with it, so that it's not just pure raw material that you can't do anything with. So some people have like their mediums, for example, will be tapping into like a client, somebody's loved one who's deceased, and they'll get like a certain smell and they'll be like, like, does your grandmother, did she wear rose perfume? And they'll be like, oh my God, she did wear rose perfume, you know? And it's just a little signal that like, yeah, you're tapping into the right data stream. You're on the right track. Keep going. Or some remote viewers have even said in the past, like, we shouldn't even call it remote viewing. We should call it remote sensing, because real pros in that field, they will be overwhelmed with a full body experience of whatever they are tapping into. And Tom Campbell will say that you're basically consciousness, and everything is consciousness. So all you have to do is think about something, and then you're perceiving it. You're perceiving the data that is programmed into that thought around, it's like, it's kind of like a web address. You type in the web address and then you go to the website and all the information is there. So for people who are working on their psychic abilities, if you can start with your meditation and just kind of quiet the mind and clear out some space around you and say, like, what do I want to tap into right now? Let's say I just want to tap into that egg-shaped UAP, for example. We'll just hold some space, focus on that web address of the egg-shaped UAP that Jake Barber talked about. We'll go specifically to that one. I don't have to close my eyes. I don't have to be in an altered state. I can parallel process. I can be here and there. I might be the kind of person that starts to see that egg. Oh, it looks exactly like the video. It actually matches what I saw. Or I might be the kind of person that is clairaudient, and I'm like, okay, I can hear the helicopter. I can hear a vast silence beyond that. There's no weather happening. It's just the helicopter and this. I'm clairsentient now, and I'm sensing and feeling, and I'm like, I can feel the swaying motion of the rope, and I can feel the body of the helicopter as if I am the helicopter. It's like a matte black, really sleek, military, fancy helicopter. And then like I can feel the weight of the egg. Whoa, it's different than I expected. It's like, it feels heavier than it should be for its size. I'm making this up, but I'm giving you an example of how these senses might function. And you might be in there with your clairalience, and you're smelling, and you're like, I can smell, oh, it's the guy piloting the thing, and like, he smells clean, like, or whatever. And like, so different people are getting these different pieces of information. And some of us might have a whole different way of doing it. Like, there are psychic people who hear songs, and that's like their psychic talent. And so they tap in and they're saying like, I'm going to tap into the egg, and they, maybe they're hearing the helicopter sound directly, or maybe they're hearing a song that has some kind of special meaning to them that triggers a few other neural pathways in their brain and leads them to a place where they now have a new piece of information about the situation that nobody else got, because that's just their special way, and it filters through their, it's like the song is like some random song by the Beatles or whatever, but it triggers a memory, and then the time they heard that song, they were in a place with a person, and they remember what that person said, and that person said something that totally helps to illuminate some piece of this puzzle or whatever. So that's why I mean it's on a spectrum, because it's not just these psychic senses that are direct. Like you might think like, well, I don't have clairvoyance. I never see things. So does that mean I'm not psychic? No. You might just be the kind of person that gets a subtle knowing, and it's very quiet. It's the quietest of all. And it's just in you. You just fucking know something, Or anyway, there's infinite amounts of ways that you might be perceiving. So I think for all of us, what's fun and exciting is to start tapping into what our ways are, and to continue working to like strip away fear around that perception. I had a lot of fear around visual perception because I've seen a lot of scary stuff that I didn't want to see, that rocked me in the way that I was describing. Like if those rocks flew into my hands, would I faint? Would I just like poop myself? Like what would happen? I would be so overwhelmed, And so it's like that has happened to me. If I see a figure in broad daylight with my eyes open that isn't part of this reality and it's not supposed to be there, my body freaks out. I freak out. I usually start shaking. I run, I fall, I like hit my head or whatever, because I'm just freaking out. And it's like, I'm not ready for that information, but it happened anyway. So back to the idea of like wading into the water, I wanted to create more space for these things to happen, and to remind myself that it doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to open your eyes and see a dark hooded figure where nobody is supposed to be. Maybe you could just see sparkles or auras, or like maybe you could start to see other things first that are calm and kind of get used to seeing stuff. And then who knows, like maybe it won't feel so weird after a while. And right as soon as I started reprogramming myself around this, I had an experience. And it was just a couple nights ago, and I was laying in bed getting ready to go to sleep. And earlier that day, I had done my mental reprogramming, and I was working on clearing fear and just saying like, I'm open to more. I'm open to seeing more. And I was laying in bed, and I opened my eyes and looked up. In the darkness, but not total darkness, I saw just like a little heart. Like it flashed in front of my eyes. Like it was like a couple yards away, like towards the ceiling. It wasn't like a big deal. It was just like a visual though. It was a visual, and it was so interesting because it was like almost like a little Lisa Frank sparkly heart. And I thought, that's the most gentle thing that like even my inner child could not be afraid of, like a sparkly heart. So I was like, cool, thank you, universe or larger consciousness system, for showing me that I can have the clairvoyant ability, and I just have to keep working with my fear around that. Clairaudience has always been pretty normal for me. I hear things a lot like music, or it's, voices are a little more stressful sometimes, but sometimes they're very neutral. And anyway, I'm just going to keep working with my fear to like release it and say, there is information available, and it's not a bad thing to perceive that stuff. It doesn't mean you're crazy. It doesn't mean you have to flip your whole life over. It doesn't mean that, there's something wrong with you. It's just a thing that happens, and it's okay if it happens, and kind of take it from there. The other senses don't scare me as much. Feeling things and knowing things, I'm like, sure, whatever. That feels natural and normal to me. I've always felt things, and I've always known things. And that's easy because an inner knowing, like I said, it's like it just bubbles up from the depths of your inner landscape. There's no marker of it. It's not like a sound that you hear or a thing you see. It just kind of, it's a very gentle integration into your knowledge base. So that one feels really comfortable for me. And feeling, I don't know, I guess I just have always identified as a very empathetic person, and so it's easy for me to understand that like I'm feeling things all the time. And my body is feeling things, and then my consciousness can interpret what my body feels and create meaning out of that. So those are my thoughts for today. This got really long. So anyway, thanks for letting me ramble about these things. I think it's really exciting and fun. I'm going to keep researching. I'm going to keep reading Abduction, and we'll keep talking about this stuff. If you've had any psychic experiences that you want to share, please put it in the comments. If you have your own special way of sensing that you would like to share, please put it in the comments. And be sure to like the video. And thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time on Shocks Talks.